Thanks, Mike. And we have an exciting panel, I think, today, and a topic, which is a cybersecurity apprenticeship. And our moderator is Dr. Costas Torregas. He's the director of the Cybersecurity and Privacy Research Institute at George Washington University. He's also a consultant for NCyTE. And I'm going to turn it over to Costas and let him introduce the panel.
Thanks very much, Stephen. This is an exciting day for me. As some of you know that are on the call, I've been an advocate and an evangelist for apprenticeships in the cybersecurity domain for many years. And finally, we have reached, I think, critical mass, starting from our national government, right down to the states, right down to localities, and most importantly, in our industry. The value of apprentices in cybersecurity jobs is recognized. And in keeping with the tradition of NCyTE trying to be ahead of the curve and letting its members and other advocates know of what's the latest and greatest in apprenticeships, we have assembled a fantastic panel for you, and I want to thank each and every one of the panel members you see listed there. We're going to go in kind of inverse order. We're going to start with a national look. And Kimberly Haig and Abigail Allen, two good friends, and Kimberly runs a spectacular bi-monthly event out of DOL where you can just sign on and hear the latest from the Office of Apprenticeships and also network with one another. Abigail is a specialist, and I think she's on the West Coast, kind of with interest in the West Coast as well as a region. They're going to tell us a little bit about what are apprenticeships and what are registered apprenticeships and what are the trending initiatives in apprenticeships for cybersecurity, because clearly we need all the help we can get in the workforce. And then I'm going to shift over to Richard Braden, who's the Managing Director of Technology Apprenticeships in CompTIA, one of the biggest and most well-known global organizations for certificates in the cybersecurity domain. And the question that we've been asking him is to cover what's the role of community colleges and universities in the apprenticeship field, specifically as they relate to CompTIA certificates. Where does CompTIA see the apprenticeship model go, and how are you incorporating it into your business? And then finally, we're going to go way down on the ground, and we're going to talk with Toby West, who's a professor at Coastline Community College, where she started back in 2017, I think, with one of the earlier programs in cybersecurity apprenticeships. She's just got a new program going, and we thought we would hear from her. What does it take to have an apprenticeship program? What are the pitfalls? What are the good news that comes? So that's the order, the batting order, as it were. And I'm not going to turn it over to Kimberly and Abigail to give us the perspective from the Department of Labor, Office of Apprenticeships. And again, apprenticeships covers a lot of ground, but we are happy to have these two advocates for apprenticeships focus on cybersecurity as well. So take it away, Kimberly and Abigail.
Good morning. Thanks for having us. Happy Friday, everybody. I see a lot of familiar names in the chat, so this is very exciting. So registered apprenticeship is a proven workforce solution. By using an apprenticeship approach, businesses with skills gaps can take steps to ensure workers are trained to specific employer needs and gain the value of an apprentice's work during their training. Registered apprenticeships are a customizable, flexible, and proven business model for developing workers. Some fast facts for fiscal year 2022, over 832,000 apprentices were served. We had 25,000 active programs. About 10% of those were new, 2,428 new programs, and a 70% growth of new apprentices over the past decade. Next slide, please. So there are 7 key elements of all registered apprenticeship programs. First is that they are industry-led. Programs are industry vetted and approved to ensure alignment with industry standards, and that apprentices are trained for highly skilled, high-demand occupations, such as cyber. Paid job. Second, apprenticeships are jobs, and apprentices earn progressive wage scale as their skills and productivity increase. They are structured on-the-job learning. Programs provide structured on-the-job training to prepare for a successful career, which includes instruction from an experienced mentor. Supplemental education. Apprentices are provided supplemental classroom education based on employers' unique training needs to ensure quality success. Diversity. Programs are designed to reflect the communities in which they operate through strong non-discrimination, anti-harassment, and recruitment practices to ensure access, equity, and inclusion. There's quality and safety. Apprentices are afforded worker protections while receiving rigorous training to equip them with the skills they need to succeed and the proper training and supervision they need to be safe. And finally, credentials. Apprentices earn portable, nationally recognized credentials within their industry. So in contrast to internships, I know there's been that question. Internships can last anywhere between a week and 12 months, where apprenticeship is a 2,000-hour, 1-year minimum, with some occupations requiring up to 5 years of training and instruction. 56% of interns land a full-time job from their internship, compared to what you can see as a 93% retention rate shown on this slide. Only about 60% of interns offer pay. Roughly 500,000 Americans intern for free each year. About 75% of those unpaid interns are women. So there is a distinct disconnect between employers' overall goals for a diverse workforce and internship programs. Current results show that 2021-2022 internship programs skew towards male and white. Those intern facts are from the National Association of Colleges and Employers, NACA. And if you want to know more about the differences between internships and apprenticeships, please visit our website, apprenticeship.gov. And now Casey will tell us more about the benefits of registering your apprenticeship program. Next slide.
Thank you, Abby. Yes, so as opposed to an internship or any other type of work-based learning program, a registered apprenticeship does require that you validate it either with the U.S. Department of Labor or a state apprenticeship agency. That's a major difference, and so we do work to verify quality for both the employer, the sponsor, and the career seeker, the apprentice themselves. By doing so, you are then gaining access to a network of technical assistants. We have field staff across the country who's very aware of the system that you're operating within, how to leverage community partners, colleges, other employers interested in joining a program. We are aware of a network that you could use and leverage. They are also very aware of the local funding opportunities, both through, for example, Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act funding, accessible through your local and state workforce boards, state tax credits, other types of federal and local funding. And then by registering your program, your graduates are then guaranteed to receive an industry recognized and nationally portable credential. So they receive that certificate of completion from the apprenticeship program. Many programs do choose, and we may hear about this later too, other types of industry recognized credentials. Go to the next page, please. Benefits for employers. So as you're working with employers, here's some little cheat sheet on really what they're getting and the benefits they're getting from registering their program. So they're creating, as Abby was saying, this is a way to really make sure to recruit and develop a diverse and highly skilled workforce. So for the sector, especially including women, minorities, veterans, it helps you improve productivity, profitability, and an employer's bottom line. We have evidence of that return on investment for apprenticeship. It increases staff loyalty and retention of workers during and following the apprenticeship program, that 93% retention rate. Creates flexible training options that ensure workers develop the right skills, minimizes liability costs through appropriate training of workers, gives them access to that federal and state resource and tax credits. So it's not just for the private sector though, it's also working with public sector, federal apprenticeship agencies, state level, local, many of them have apprenticeship programs as well. We have lots of benefits clearly for the education partners as well, primarily through that creating stronger link between the education system and the economic development system, the companies in your area. Slide 5. Here are the very basic steps. I'm not going to walk through them all, but we do work with you if you're interested to explore, learn more about registered apprenticeship. This is a great start. You can then either build or partner, so you don't have to start it on your own. There are lots of partners out there that we can work with, especially industry intermediaries is something that we have a lot of information about. I can share a fact sheet about that afterwards too. And then lastly, on our side is to register. That makes it become a registered apprenticeship program, and then we'll work with you to launch and recruit and monitor your program and share success stories. Okay, thank you.
That's great. Thanks very much for that overview. And since if the pre-registration numbers hold firm, about half our audience are community colleges, about a quarter of our audience are universities, and the balance is government, industry, the nonprofit world, and K through 12 educators. So we really have a mix, and I just wanted to remind people of one word that Casey just hit, and that's partnerships. It's very hard to launch an apprenticeship program without partnerships. And as we get deeper into the topic, I think you'll see some of the elements of this kind of spoke of resource people that are there to help you. So for those of you that don't have an apprenticeship program, think of the word partnership. You don't have to go alone. In fact, there are lots of ways to speed up your entry into the apprenticeship domain. So I'm not going to turn over to my friend Rich Braden from CompTIA, and I'm going to ask him to be a little schizophrenic to address two different things. One is CompTIA, one of the biggest global organizations for certifications in the cybersecurity domain, is into apprenticeships. In fact, that's his title. He's managing the apprenticeship programs at CompTIA. Why? What's the link between CompTIA and apprenticeships? And then secondly, and more importantly, how does CompTIA's own services play into the apprenticeship, your certificates and so on? Would community colleges have to be on board with the CompTIA strategies? How can we simplify that domain? So with that as an introduction, Richard, take off.
Thanks, my friend. I appreciate it very much. So just a quick note about CompTIA. Everybody knows who we are, largest trade association for IT in the world, and certainly provide a lot of certifications and credentialing for IT pathways. Specifically to the question of why apprenticeship, as a nonprofit organization, we certainly do a lot of philanthropic things, including try and test in the water for expanding tech in any way, shape, or form. And so workforce development is critical. So a couple of years, we did a partnership with AIR, an intermediary, Americans Institute for Research, and the Department of Labor to really go in that direction full bore. So we're now in the kind of the apprenticeship intermediary business. We have our own national program sponsorships where we're helping small employers get on board to hire apprentices, which is really important. Probably the largest part of our constituency are managed service providers. They're smaller organizations, maybe 15, 25, 30 people want to get into apprenticeship, but they don't have the resources necessarily to build their own programs. So we're a program sponsor for those. So this is all very service oriented, Costas. All boats rise when we help the tech industry. We are completely agnostic. Your interests are our interests in any way, shape, or form. So we're there to help you, and now in the workforce development space. Specifically in our program, we developed national guideline standards for 5 occupations, one of which is a cybersecurity technician. We also have that kind of gateway occupation, tech support specialist. I call it gateway because that's probably the most in demand and occupation and the easiest for people to get into. Basically, if folks present either an A+ certification or they work their way into that through the apprenticeship, they're now in the IT field, which is phenomenal. I think it really is fantastic. You think about the real benefits of apprenticeship. I think of 2 things: inclusivity, totally inclusivity, and then also family sustaining wages. And Abigail mentioned that in her presentation. And so what's interesting about a tech is that a lot of family supporting wages and benefits and things are brought to people through collective bargaining, unions. Well, tech is not a unionized field necessarily. And so we're driven by market The market is demand is there, therefore the wages are there. So it's just great to get into this field and bring people into a really productive career pathway for their lives. In terms of cyber, we've got the Security Plus, which is probably the credential that most cyber boot camps produce after maybe an 18, 20, or 24-week journey. And that seems to be kind of a minimum credential for a lot of employers when they're looking at starting an apprenticeship in particular, even though we like to say we have entry-level jobs, which involve 0 to 3 years of experience. I think we could all safely say that from a cyber perspective, an entry-level job is going to be in the high side of that 3 years, regardless of what that mix of experiences is. And also our certifications help really credentialize and say to the marketplace that these people know something, and it's backed by a global standard. So whether you're getting A+, Network Plus, or Security Plus, that journey, I think from an entry-level perspective is kind of that Network Plus, Security Plus credential. And again, whether you're attaining that in the apprenticeship or you show up with that credential, it still makes it a great experience to be apprenticeable, if you will. As far as running a program, things that we've learned, I think that's design of program is really, really important. It's very, very important to understand the employer's requirements. I don't think that we can spend enough time understanding requirements for a cyber apprenticeship, because cyber is kind of a work of art. It means a lot of things to a lot of different people. So you really have to understand what it is the employer is trying to accomplish, and make sure you design the program to meet that need. In our occupational standard for cyber, we say, because it's competency based, that we would expect at least 20 or 25% of those competencies to evolve and be shaped around the customer's needs. And we make sure we do that so that there's no missteps. And now you've got that guided pathway. And that's really important to have for the apprentice sake and for the employer's sake. So we all know what direction we're going into. So requirements. The next thing I would say is, as far as apprentices are concerned, to make sure that we're really providing, really multiple sources of support for these folks, whether they need wraparound services, if they're going to community colleges and doing an apprenticeship. So scheduling, mentoring, guidance, really important. We can't make any assumptions that they know what the next steps are. They have to be spelled out very clearly, and they have to be supported accordingly. And the last thing I'll say is that, and you've already alluded to this, that if you're going to start an apprenticeship program, then by all means, fully utilize the resources that are supported, that are given to you by the Department of Labor and other intermediaries that you might be working with, because you can't have enough instruction on how to do this and do it well. So hats off to my friends at the DOL. They've been instrumental in helping us a great deal when we've started our national program sponsorship, to really make sure that we're doing it right. There's certain technical aspects to doing this. You want to do it right the first time, not have to do rework and so forth, to make sure that you're really producing a great program for the employer and the apprentice. So that's my short story, Costas. Anything else you'd like to know?
No, that was great. And for universities, community colleges, folks in the K through 12 area that want to kind of get a whiff of how CompTIA is playing in the apprenticeship field, just go to the CompTIA website, presumably, and take it from there. You might want to put in a URL in the chat so they can find you.
And the one thing, if I may, Costas, one thing I my notes I'm looking at here. So I would say to the folks in the community colleges, to really stress the importance of helping your students achieve the credential, the certification. You guys are great at building out curriculum, and just try to drive towards helping those students really get that credential, because that's what employers want. That's the requirement. If you want our people employed, they want to see that they've achieved A+, Network Plus, Security Plus, and do everything we can to help them really successfully achieve that credential. And we have got lots of resources and help for you to do that too, by the way. But I can't stress that enough in terms of how important it is to apprenticeship and making someone attractive for either an internship or an apprenticeship, any kind of work-based learning program.
Great. Thanks,
Thank you.
Richard.
Thank
And
you.
stay tuned because we're going to have a lot of questions, I know, from
Yes,
the
sir.
chat and everywhere else. I'm going to turn last to my good friend Toby West. Last time we saw each other was at the WESIS conference, the Women's Cybersecurity Conference. And we chatted a little bit about her programs through the years, I think back 2017, as I mentioned in my introductory remarks. And Toby, I wonder if you can help, especially the community colleges that are scratching their heads saying, is there a role for me? Should I do something? And what's in it for me kind of thing, to establish an apprenticeship program with my industry partners in the area. You're the living proof that it works and it's important. So take us through your journey. Thanks.
Thank you. I just want to make sure I'm not choppy sounding. Sound okay? Yes. No? Okay, good. I teach at Coastline College, and we added the apprenticeship, as Costas mentioned, in about 2017. I started with a grant from, oh, I heard somebody talk, a grant from the state chancellor's office. And that grant gave us the opportunity to put a program together, because as we know, sometimes you need some startup money to get things going, but not always. Part of that was because we aim to have 50 registered apprentices within a certain amount of time, but I don't believe that number is something required for everyone. So I wish we would have dialed it down a little bit because we took a running start with that. So if you're going to, I would say, start with a lower number. Don't try to go too much at once. But some of the things that we did to build it up, because just like we're listening now to find out what an apprenticeship is, students are wondering, what is an apprenticeship? What does it mean to me? What will it mean to my future? And what can I do with it? So we took that approach and we did some program orientations. We did some informational sessions and things like that to help inform students what it could mean. And our program includes 7 classes, which is aligned with our curriculum associated with a certificate, making it easier for students to achieve some sort of completion at our program, as well as working towards the apprenticeship. And within that, and Richard made a great point, aligning with the CompTIA certifications made it really easy to, our curriculum is aligned already with CompTIA certifications. So it made it easy for us to prepare students for those certifications and then make it achievable for them. In part of what our program did and does now is we offered apprentices the certification voucher through CompTIA so that they could take it at no extra cost to them. And because of that, doing that in our apprenticeship, we've been able to do it also for our regular classes. So all of our students have that opportunity, and we let them choose between the final exam or taking the CompTIA exam at the end of the classes. And it's been really great. Our pass rates are increasing. Everything is going very well. So we also have Cisco and AWS certifications as well, because we have work roles aligned with cloud and IT. So a couple, sorry, it's a little bit warm where I am. You're talking about temperatures, it's already 80 and it's, so early in the morning. So a couple of things that I see for the apprenticeship for students is that it provides a pathway so that they can see how to reach the career. We are career and technical education, but that doesn't always mean that for a student coming into the program, it's very obvious how they can go and get that job. So the apprenticeship helps us align what our curriculum will be for a work role. And then it also makes it easier for the students to figure out what jobs to go out and look for. Part of what we do is we ask the students to look at jobs really early. What is it that you're interested in? What industries? And how do we help you prepare? So getting, resume workshops and all of those sort of things going so that students are thinking about it right away when they start taking the classes instead of at the end. And I know some people on the call, we've talked about students being at the end of their 4-year journey and not even having their resume ready yet. So with our program, we're starting that right away within the first, month or 2 of being in the classes. A couple of success stories, I'll say, that didn't go with particularly the way we wanted the apprenticeships to go. One transitioned to a master's program instead of completing. A couple moved out of state instead of completing, but for the most part, we've been, getting these wonderful success stories where the students are finishing and then moving on to something beyond entry level. So how do we get them there? The apprenticeship has been the way, and it's been the most beneficial, where we hear the most from students what they're doing as far as work. As many of you on the call, if you're teaching at the community college level, they talk to you while they're in the class, but they don't always come back and tell you. So the apprenticeship is a really good way to keep in touch, figure out what they're doing. And for our program overall, I would say the best success story is being able to talk with Abby at DOL has been so helpful and so incredible over the years. One of the big transitions we made this past summer, well, actually a year ago now almost, is to switch from the hours-based to the competency-based. Because when we were hours-based, it was a lot more difficult to get students through the full 2,000 hours. But now being competency-based means we can get them, and we all know people want to get through their journey much faster, as fast as possible. So that's been one of the great switches, I would say. Keeping in touch with students, though, is going to be the most challenging part, is keeping in touch with them through their entire program. Was there anything else you wanted me to cover?
Those are great pointers, Toby. Thanks very much, and thanks for, I know you've got something in your throat, and we appreciate you being with us and kind of slugging on for this presentation. I think you've laid your finger on a couple of specific things, like support from others. That is key. Flexibility in the program, focus on the certifications. The one thing that I keep hearing, and I'm going to ask the panel to respond to it, but before, just to tee it up, we hear a lot about the importance of industry in any kind of apprenticeship program. So I thought to myself, I was looking through the registrant list, I espied the name Michael Preble on the list, who works in the Department of Commerce. For it's nice, but in the Department of Commerce. The Department of Commerce is like industry. This is what industry looks to at the federal government. So, Michael, I know in your work with New America before you joined the federal government ranks, and now with NIST, you've been thinking about industry and its role in apprenticeships and other workforce development strategies. So maybe could you give us an impromptu kind of a quick recitation of how you see the industry engagement, and then we'll go to the panelists for their reaction. Thanks very much for agreeing on such short notice to give us a few words.
Absolutely. I apologize, Costas, too. I was listening to the presentation. I guess I should have been preparing some remarks. As Costas said, I come to this work at NICE in the National Institute of Standards and Technology from working at New America, nonprofit, nonpartisan think tank, with Kimberly, with Costas, many other people supporting the development of apprenticeships in cybersecurity and in other industries. Moving into the Department of Commerce, moving into NIST, the work that I've been doing has really been sort of laser focused on supporting the NICE framework. So this big, massive, basically Excel spreadsheet of knowledges, skills, tasks, work roles, competencies, different levels of sort of abstraction about what cybersecurity work consists of, and trying to use that, or trying to create opportunities to use that to better explain what actually happens on the job in cybersecurity, and then how we get people into those roles. I think from the, there's a lot of work that we're doing internally, again, to make that, to make this framework more sort of effective, more usable, easier to approach. It's a complicated body of knowledge when you look at it for the first time. One of the things that I think is really helpful about apprenticeship in this equation is that it is really sort of focused on one job. It takes a much more manageable sort of level of analysis than trying to understand the entire cybersecurity workforce. So just looking back, earlier in the presentation, Richard, I think the way that you described the, I forget the exact word that you used, but the entry level sort of pathway of the tech support specialist, not necessarily something we would consider a cybersecurity occupation, but I think a really helpful way to, to think about how we sort of allow people to break into cybersecurity jobs. So just two things that I would mention, about NICE's work going forward that I think are especially relevant to apprenticeships. And you have to forgive me, I think they're They're a little bit sort of more tangentially related, but I do think they're sort of crucial. The first is that, you know, we're doing a lot of thinking about sort of, sorry, I should, let me just give a little bit of a quick explanation. There's one feature of the NICE framework in particular, the work role, which is easy to confuse with the job title. So for example, systems administration is one, or secure software development is another. And these are functions that you accomplish as a cybersecurity worker in a particular occupation. They're distinct from job position titles in that multiple work roles can live in a job position. And you know, one of the things that we are realizing is that when industry comes to, you know, certainly to some of the organizations represented in this call, to community colleges, to CompTIA, to the U.S. Department of Labor, or to the NICE framework team, they're not thinking in terms of work roles. Even if we can explain rather clearly what NICE framework work roles are, they're thinking in terms of job descriptions. And so that's again why, you know, this sort of this focus of apprenticeship on a specific occupation is really important. What we want to do, one of the things that we want to do, and I think this is one of the things that's really relevant for apprenticeship, is sort of clarify how different elements of the NICE framework can be used to map out not just a single job, but a career progression. So moving, for example, from an IT support role to a systems administration role, to an ethical hacker, or to a SOC analyst, or to a cybersecurity analyst, or some other, or you know, threat analyst, cybersecurity policy advisor, some other much more advanced occupations. When we hear about the U.S. Department of Labor talking, and the U.S. Department of Commerce for that matter, talking about the cybersecurity workforce shortage, they're often talking about those much more advanced positions, but at this point, we don't really have a good map of how you get there. That's the one thing. The second thing, and I'm sorry to be taking, I hope I'm not taking too much time here, Costas. The second thing I would is say this strategically, there is sort of a gap, maybe a shortfall in some of the infrastructure that we have about communicating skills. There are several of these, in fact. One of the crew used the NICE framework to sort of break apart job descriptions and understand what's inside them. And although we can use the NICE framework to explain what different learners are able to, or should, or could, you know, accomplish through their workforce preparation, we don't yet have a really reliable way of saying when somebody is ready for a specific job. And so the way we're thinking about that is in terms of proficiency levels. This is a conversation, of course, that really crucially involves certification providers and education providers like community colleges. So one of the things you'll hear from NICE more and more is about this conversation of proficiency scales. And we will really, really appreciate any sort of input that you all might have about how we can make something like that usable and comprehensible for those working in education and those also working in industry.
Thanks very much, Michael, for that spontaneous.
Sorry, Phil, his time there.
So if I can now, I'm going to turn to the panel with a couple of questions. And please, the audience, start putting questions on the chat, and Michael Singletary will be reviewing them and bring some up for discussion as well. The one thing that I wanted to mention is that the Office of National Cybersecurity Director just issued a strategy for the nation, and of course, NCyTE had a major role to play in gathering community college input for that strategy, and we're expecting to see a secondary strategy for workforce development and education. But given the fact that the strategy is out there, do you have any ideas, any comments about how the national strategy might be supportive of apprenticeships, or might give apprenticeships a different kind of a twist? I know apprenticeships are aligned with the strategy, and I think they're even mentioned in the preliminary major national strategy. That's very high level. I wonder if any of the panel members have some reaction about the strategy that is available on the White House web and on the Office of National Cybersecurity Director for you to download and read. It's not a long read, but it's a very important one. So any comments from our panel?
This is Kimberly, Department of Labor, and we've certainly appreciated our getting to be involved in that effort as well. I will just say, yes, registered apprenticeship is a key strategy to achieving the goals laid forth in the published paper so far, for a number of reasons. It really it answers the call for not just this, but other administrative and other clear priorities from this administration. It answers a call to serve underserved populations, to diversify the federal workforce, just to scale workforce opportunities that meet the demand for these growing industries and occupations. And so it's not a surprise that registered apprenticeship is turned to as a solution to answer these. For example, it also there's a push towards skills-based hiring and towards providing experiential learning. And so, this is kind of a golden standard for these.
Great.
Hey, Costas, I could answer it a little bit differently, not from the White House perspective systems, but from maybe more boots on the ground. I think that, we'd all agree that, and I mentioned this in my introduction too, that cyber is kind of a word of art. What do you mean by cyber, employer? Tell us what you're trying to do in that. And Mike, you might be able to relate to this since you're doing all those analytics. I mean, it's not created equally necessarily or always generalizable, certainly sector specific and so forth in many instances. But apprenticeship might have to be something that's looked upon as stackable. We think about stackable certifications to achieve a certain level of expertise, and also with apprenticeship, the pathway being stackable. What does entry level mean? What does mid level mean, and so forth, and still not losing sight of the benefits of apprenticeship, which I think is important. But I think we have a lot of work to do to figure that out. It's not truly just entry level, do it. It's something that has to be really analyzed further as the apprenticeship model is applied to that problem. I think it absolutely can work, though. There's no question.
Yeah, good point. And I can't but ask Stephen Miller to pipe in, our overall moderator, because he's put a question that has already solicited several thumbs up from the audience, and it's a real kind of cry in the darkness. Stephen, why don't you read out your question?
Sure. Well, in New Mexico, we partnered with Central New Mexico Community College. They administered the apprenticeship program. We taught the courses, and we offer the apprenticeship certificate, and that is A+, Network Plus, Security Plus, the EC Council risk assessment, and the ethical hacking, and we added the SOC analyst. And like you had mentioned, we've kind of tailored that based on what some of that's someone maybe already in IT in a company, and so we can help that stackable credentials. But the problem is we have well over 100 students that are interested in the apprenticeship program, and it continually every month we keep getting requests, but we can't entice any of the industry in New Mexico to agree to do this. After they had a grant at CNM, after that grant was finished, there was no takers after that. The industry just kind of, I guess, turned their back on us. So is there any partnership we can have with DOL or others that could help us promote the apprenticeship? So what we're doing is internships right now. The other thought I had is that we're actually putting in a SOC at our college, and it's going to be a for-profit SOC. So we are going to maybe apply for an apprenticeship as part of that SOC.
Right. Any reaction? How do we get industry engaged? And of course, I hear this in every single discussion on apprenticeships. A, industry is important. B, it's hard to get them engaged. So who's got some quick tricks to mention?
Well, we do have two initiatives. We're doing our second round of industry intermediaries, and that really helps because, they're high-level industry associations that often help engage the smaller employers. And then we also have the apprenticeship ambassadors. So we have these hitting it on both sides. And then holding workshops. I know I see Rosalinda on here. We are going to do an employer targeted workshop in her area. And then if Toby can also share some of her best practices, they've been very successful in employer engagement at CCAP. And we're always here to help if you do want to hold a local community-based employer engagement webinar or even an in-person event. Casey or I are available either virtually or in person to participate. Toby, do you have any available to talk about how you've been engaging employers?
One of the first things we did was engage with our local unified school districts, the high school districts and the elementary schools in our area, because we're a very dense population. So it made it easy for us to look at those cases. They already had IT roles, and those people working in those roles were interested in gaining new skills in cyber. So is that sort of crossover that we're kind of used to hearing about, moving from IT into cyber. So that was one of our very first opportunities. And then also at our community college district, we had hired apprentices there, which satisfied a gap that we had with the community college district. So that's been our first primary, space to put people into employment. And then some of our local, based on this, our campus is a distributed campus. So we have different cities that our campuses are in. So we've tried to work close to whatever's at the city hall space there. A lot of employers are in that area. And then also through students, if they're already employed in, say, an IT role in some smaller company and they want to cross over to cyber and their company's looking for cyber, that's also been a way, because then we're providing that education piece that and training that they didn't have time for. That's been our way.
Yeah, I would also just stress that public-private partnerships are an imperative in starting a program in a local market. And it really does need to be brokered, Stephen. I mean, I think there's a lot of funding sources, and we have to do the work for the employer to think through the plan, and not just show up and say, "Well, there's a grant here, there's a grant there, we got this, that." They're like, "What do I do?" It's like, because the two questions that'll always come through with an employer, and I can only speak for tech. Obviously, I can't speak on the union side or trade side, but is basically who's doing it and how do you get it done? And the getting it done piece has to be something that is more longitudinal. It's not just starting it today because we have some WIOA dollars in a corner or something. I mean, it really has to be almost financed. If you've got 100 able-bodied apprentices or people that are apprenticeable in your school, that's a great workforce. Those are stakeholders in those businesses, and the businesses are stakeholders in their career path. Look at it that way. How do you bring the two together? I mean, and it does require a great partnership to do that, but to figure out everything in advance so that it's presented and they understand it, and they can say, "Yep, we'll try that. Let's do a cohort. Let's just start with 12."
Yeah, those are all
Thank
great, great ideas. Debbie Hopkins, you put something in for the curriculum advisory boards. Do you want to go off mute and make your point?
Yes, sure. Debbie Hopkins here. I worked in industry for a very long time myself, and I'm also one of the industry intermediaries. Sorry, you're seeing my fireplace now. And I would say for probably 10 years, part of the message in many workforce programs has been industry engagement, trying to get businesses to look at developing their pipeline from high school, from middle school, but really look at a longer extension of how they're going to get the workforce they need. And this has not been a U.S. Strategy, especially in high tech. I think there's a lot of just paying the top dollar and buying the talent that you need and stealing from each other. And that's a short-term solution for such a big need. So yes, it starts with hi Kimberly. It starts with I think with businesses having to have a training culture themselves. So if they have a training culture, and they already, are promoting folks, they already have a pathway, then the apprenticeship model fits in very well. And if you can get them involved, in curriculum advisory positions, if they really are engaged in that, through like workforce sector strategies, if they really are engaged in that, that's where you're talking about apprenticeship, and you're bringing them along. So instead of pushing a program, you're giving them some tools and let them experience it for themselves. And then for the ones who do experience, I know Richard will agree, the ones who really do experience it and they have it for the right reasons and they're in it for the long haul, they love apprenticeship. But getting there, Stephen, it is not easy.
Oh yeah, you mentioned something, Debbie, really important is as a qualifier, do they have an internship program where they're actively bringing students in to do something? It doesn't have to be perfect, just needs to be directionally correct. Whether they're paid or not, doesn't matter. It's a work-based learning experience. So therefore, they have then the human capital to devote to that on some level, and they have a capability that they've built. Again, doesn't have to be perfect, but they've started something that's recognizable and they're doing work-based learning. So great point, Debbie.
Yeah, that coaching model, coaching, if it's inherent in the company,
absolutely,
you've already got a big step.
This is a great conversation. I hate to say this, but we're running out of time now. I always want to give my panelists a 1 or 2 minute summary remark, anything that comes to your mind or something that dovetails well. So start thinking, and I'm going to go in the inverse order. I'll start with Toby, then Richard, and then our friends from DOL. Just some concluding remarks. Toby, you're up.
I think my advice would be, if you want to start an apprenticeship, to take the approach of looking at it holistically. What does it mean, from start to finish, not finish, but like sustainability long-term, I suppose, so that you can put all of the pieces in place as much as possible right up front. How students will communicate their needs, and how you will communicate things out to the students so that they know their pathway, they know what the opportunity is, and they know their commitment to it. I think at first that was some of the challenge, is getting that commitment so that students understand they're there to get more than just the free education. They're supposed to stay and take on the apprenticeship role as well. So that, I think, is one of the key pieces, is knowing what it is completely to your school.
Thanks very much, Toby, and thanks for being with us. Richard, you're next.
Yeah, I would say, don't do it alone. We've talked about this. Regardless of what your industry is, your interest is, whether you're a training provider or you wanted to get into program sponsorship, or you happen to be an employer, like Steve, you were saying, hey, you're gonna open up a SOC, you're gonna be an employer for your apprentices. Fantastic. Don't do it alone. Call us, and DOL. The workforce boards, CompTIA is there to serve, and we're all here to help. Don't do it alone.
Great. And last, and by the way, we talked about intermediaries. Casey has put in some URLs towards the bottom of the chat about what is an intermediary. It's a spectacular idea of how an industry partner, a college doesn't have to do the whole thing, but there are people with professional expertise that can start them off in the right direction and get them going. So I'll turn it back to you, Casey, and Abigail.
Well, I just leave you with a few numbers. Over the last few years, we've had a 34% growth of programs, cybersecurity related programs. As of earlier this year, there were 733 registered programs in cybersecurity field, and resulting in 43,000 apprentices. So I guess just letting you know that you're in good company. There are a lot of, while it can be hard to find employers, they are out there that are looking for opportunities like this to partner with colleges and universities. Many of these programs are run and have by colleges, or have a big role for colleges in the related technical instruction. So there is a community of us out there that are eager to work with you and welcome you.
Great.
Yeah, so I would say start small. Like Toby was saying, they kind of overshot on that 50, and you don't even need the 12. All you need is one. You need one employer and one apprentice for 1 year, and you have a year to do it. So start small, work the kinks out. We're here to help at every step, and get the ball rolling in a reasonable manner. Don't try to hire new staff and go crazy with it. Just start small.
Great. Well, this has been a great conversation. I wish we had more time, but it's my duty now to turn it back to Stephen Miller to close us out. Thank you very much for being here.
Thanks, Costas, and to the panel. This was very good. Gave me some good, the internship point was a good one. We do work with a lot of companies on internships. We never thought about tying those into an apprenticeship. So I'll follow up on that, and I'll follow up with the rest of the group. So thank you. Mike, I guess you want to cover anything at the end here, and
I want to say,
wrap it up.
Yeah, I want to say thanks to Costas and the panelists. This has been a great, insight meeting, and we really appreciate the time that you contributed. And of course, to everybody who took the time to attend today, really appreciate all the input that you gave us. If you do have some feedback you would like to send us, please fill out our survey here, and we would be happy to hear back from you on that. But that's all I have.
Have a good weekend, everyone.
Yeah, enjoy and think apprenticeship.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Great job, guys.
Thank you,
Hey,
Michael.
We'll see you next time, eh?
Yeah.
And for God's sake, don't do anything that I wouldn't do.